After the big news yesterday that Sandro Tonali signed a secret 2-year extension at Newcastle United, taking his contract to 2030, reports coming out this morning that new director of football Ross Wilson has two players targeted to get new contracts signed to lock down the future of Newcastle United. Two young players that we want to keep around for a long time. I'm going to talk about them in a moment as well. Big Yas, Newcastle chairman, has a Brazilian player on his list. And no, it's not Bruno, no, it's not Joelinton. It is a young striker who is reportedly a target of Newcastle going into this January window. Yes, guys, how's it going? Welcome back to a new video on this early Thursday morning. It's still dark outside. Horrible feeling starting and finishing work when it's dark. But yes, we have some good stuff to talk about in this video with regards to Newcastle United. So be sure to drop a like if you are happy to see Sandro get his new deal. Drop a like if you would like to see these two players in this video get a new deal as well. And we will start off with, strangely enough as well, the two players we're going to talk about are two players who have been targeted by other clubs, whether it in the summer or whether it be recently as well, which, you know, I guess it's a good thing that teams have interest in our players, but undoubtedly, you know, we fell into a tough spot in the summer with contracts running down. You know, we don't want to be there again. And that's exactly why the extension of Sandro Tonali is big for us. Interestingly enough, it didn't actually happen yesterday. It happened 2 years ago where Sandro wasn't even playing football. He was training behind the scenes because he was banned. It sounds like it was a bit of a mutual agreement between two parties that Sandro was going, look, I'm not going to play for a year of my contract. And Newcastle are saying, well, do us the favour. And, well, for the favour, you're getting paid. Well, reports are that he took a pay reduction because he felt like it was the right thing to do, whether it was contractual, you know, that Newcastle had something in there that said if you're not playing for this, that, X, Y, Z, then we're not going to pay you the full amount. But regardless, it's good news for us because undoubtedly, you know, we paid 50 million for Sandro. What are you talking now? Double that, if not more. So that's good news. And obviously, we've got some good young players at our football club, and we want to keep them for a long time. And one of those players who has had a great start to this season is Sven Botman. I had to double look at this. 2022 was signed Sven Botman. Things are moving so fast, and look, they always do in football, but Sven Botman signed a 5-year deal. So going into this summer, he would have 1 year left on his contract. And he talk about vulnerable positions. You know, realistically, even these days, even 2 years on a contract left is enough to bring the value of a player down. 1 year, you know, you're starting to get worried. Having said that, you know, Mark Gahey had 6 months left, well, nothing left on his deal virtually, and still Crystal Palace wanted 80 million for him. We've still spent a lot of money on Wizza, who had 1 year left on his deal. So the situation obviously matters, but Sven Botman will have just 1 year left on his deal, signed back in 2022, 5-year deal to 2027. Undoubtedly, he is high on Ross Wilson's list for a new contract. They reckon Sven Botman's getting around 90 grand a week, so I think he is already kind of up there with one of the top paid players. But reports have come out in the last couple of months, really, from Liverpool, obviously, that they have interest in Sven Botman because that's the way Liverpool seem to do business. They tell everybody about what they're going to do before they do it. Very, very strange. But as I mentioned, he is definitely one Newcastle want to lock down. Has had an up and down time at Newcastle United. Was brought in, I think, is the future. And I'm hoping he still can be that. That's what the thing is with Sven Botman. We've had 3 years of him. We're coming into 4 years, and you hope the best is yet to come. Hopefully, we will see the best of Sven Botman this season. The thought initially was that he would maybe replace Dan Burn or certainly become competition for Dan Burn. And essentially, you know, Dan Burn has been the one leading the charge. Botman and Chow is exciting. Newcastle over the years have had good centre-backs, but I think we've always struggled to have good centre-back partnerships. I think you could argue that Burn and Shaw have, well, we won a cup, didn't we? So you could argue one of the most successful centre-back partnerships we've had, and have certainly been one of the most solid. Gaining Champions League football, Shaw scoring against PSG, Dan Burn, first term basis there. Dan Burns scoring in the Carabao Cup final. No rush for either of them to be pushed to one side, because I think they're both very, very brought very good times to Newcastle. I think they both have stuff to give to Newcastle. I think Dan Burn will probably play in England in the summer. He's having a charge late in his career, but Botman and Chow are exciting. Chow has just brought that little bit of extra pace, and Botman, with just that little bit more game time, has looked really good. So injuries have been trouble for Botman. That's something that we need to really hope we can sort. We've made changes behind the scenes to try and reduce injuries to players. Hopefully he and Botman can sign a new long-term deal. Chow's just signed a 5-year deal, get Botman on a 3-4 year extension. And despite Liverpool interest, Botman has gone on record, maybe he hasn't wrote it down, has been reported to be very interested in getting that new deal sorted, and probably wants a few extra quid for himself as well. So that is a big one. The other young player that we are rumoured to be talking to next on contracts is Tino Livramento. I mentioned it at the start, another player who has been targeted. Tino Livramento targeted by Manchester City in the summer. I don't think there was ever any bids on record, but the reports were that Newcastle wanted as much as 80 million plus before they would even enter conversations with Manchester City over Tino Livramento. That is a hell of a lot of money for a right back. But if we want to keep building our squad, you shouldn't sell your best players. And I think Tino's come in and had a slow start. I think, Trippier still getting a lot of game time. Tino Livramento, another player who struggled with injuries. But we talk about going and winning that cup, didn't we? Yes, Dan Burn was big. Yes, Shaw was big. Tino Livramento coming in just at the right time and had a really good season at left back, albeit not at right back. Another player with a couple of injury troubles, out injured right now. Touch wood, it's not as bad as first team, then we could see him back in a few months' time. But yes, Tino Livramento reportedly on around 50 grand a week. That may well increase with an extension. And he signed a 5-year deal back in 2023. So you're looking at 2 years left approaching this summer. I think it's probably the interest from the likes of Manchester City that's pushing this one that little bit quicker through the door. But yes, Tino Livramento, again, Botman, Tino right back, Botman, Chow, Hall left back. You let me know your thoughts on that back line down in the comments. Is that a back line you want to see get new deals, get sorted and pushing forward? And then look, waiting in the wings, Trippier right back, Burn, Shaw, or even interchanging. That's a big thing that I'm interested to see what Newcastle do this January window. Because it was clear that we had big targets this summer, we wanted to get the striker in, we wanted to get the another Ramsey in the centre midfield in, we wanted that right winger in Alanga, we wanted a centre-back, we got Chow in, and then you look at the lineup, Alanga hasn't always kicked on, Wizard's had the injury, Ramsey's had the injury. The players that we brought in haven't exactly gelled straight away. We had the tough situation with the striker. Voltemada, I think we'd all agree, has fitted in very quickly. Has scored some great goals, but for me, doesn't have enough shots. It's fair enough that he scores wonder goals every other game. I mean, I'll take it, but I would like him to have 5 shots a game, 3 on target. You're more likely to score the more often you shoot. Thank you, Michael Owen. So that's something I want us to improve on, but. For example, Bruno is it was really interesting to see how well Miley did actually in the Champions League this week because it was no Tonali. Like, there are still players in our team who I feel at times like are irreplaceable. Like, fair enough, Miley did well without Tonali, but Bruno led the midfield. Bruno did everything. Like, he did so much. There was so much reliance on Gordon. I would like us this January. I don't know that there's any set positions that I'm going, we'll have to do that. I think it's like we need to just strengthen. If there is an injury, I've just discussed 2 of them in this video for 2 key players. We need to kind of look at more supporting roles and bring someone in who can step in and can take over. Or if not, look at who's next in line, who's the future, who's coming in next. And Newcastle reports are Newcastle chairman has his eyes on a Brazilian. That's right, reports coming out yesterday and this morning are that Newcastle are interested in a 19-year-old Brazilian striker, 6'1", Rayan, from Vasco da Gama. 30 million price tag already on a 19-year-old. I think he scored 15 goals this calendar year and has already been scouted by some top teams, Aston Villa, Spurs, and a few other Premier League sides. And reportedly, Big Yas. Maybe he's got on the blower at Ross Wilson. We've got Bruno, we've got Joe Linton. We want to get a Brazilian striker in to light it up. And look, striker, yeah, we need to see what happens with Wissa between now and the January window. Hopefully he can come in. I never want to deny anyone opportunities internationally, but going to AFCON would be a pain for us. Obviously with the injury issues that he's had. But the thing is very quickly one injury and we're looking at, right, Voltemada, you've played 5 games in England. Can you please score 20 plus goals for us this season? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot going on. And I don't necessarily believe that we need to go and spend another 50, 60 million on another striker. But I think we need depth in a lot of positions. Elanga's come in and struggled. Jacob Murphy came in at the weekend and did great. Barnes came on and scored 2 goals. I think that's the personnel we'll have with a mix of Eddie Howe being brave enough to mix things up. The season when we got Champions League a few years ago, we played the same team every single week. Like it was a good job. The likes of a Bruno can play 50 games a season. He's not the quickest. He's not always the quickest or the paces. I think it actually helps Bruno because it means that he does a lot of running, but it's not that quick burst energy, which often can lead to kind of muscle problems. I think it kind of helps Bruno that he does kind of saunter around a bit and kind of play the ball. It's a nice way to watch a player play, but I think it works into his game. It allows him to be available for more games. I think Joe Linton, a big part of his game is being that brute force. He's struggled with it this season. Is it tiredness from a heavy season? Is it the international duties where he's going away, 30-hour trips to Japan and coming back? And that's why we need to have just that little bit more flexibility on the ground. And after having quite a big spendy summer, fair enough, we've got money to spend after a certain player got sold, so it'll be interesting to see how we use the money. But I think going down the route of further afield as well, why we discussed it in the summer. And I think Eddie Howe was cautious on wanting to spend big money on players and more unknown players. I think Voltemada was somewhat unknown, but I think he was known on Eddie Howe's list. I mean, once you started talking about Brazilian players from the Brazilian league, that's an extension of, that's another layer. 25 million on a player who's a little bit out there, I think I still quite like it. Slightly more creative, more attacking player that can help us with the low block, etc. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but it's clear that Newcastle do want to promote this kind of youth coming through. Eddie Howe mentioned it on Tuesday, what day is it? Tuesday night after the Benfica game. He said that he's looking forward to his relationship building with Ross Wilson. He spoke about the fact that it's not just the first 11, it is the academy, it is the women's team. He listed all of these jobs that Ross Wilson's going to be doing, and I'm excited to see it happen as well. We've only just 5 minutes ago signed 14-year-old, 15-year-old Josh Kenchington from Barnsley, 350 grand on a kid. So there's money there, and it's something that Newcastle want to build on. And I think Eddie Howe himself even called it like building for the future. And I think that's what bringing Botman in on a new deal, bringing Tino in on a new deal, looking at the slightly more unknown players further afield and targeting these youngsters to start making a breakthrough in the team, because we don't get as many as we want. Man City's like a machine, and look where you're years behind them. like turning these players around. Until we get there, we need to poach a few from a few other places, and then hopefully in 5 years' time, we can be the ones who are starting to produce these players that can come in and help rotate, build this depth, not just the squad depth, like the club depth. 25 under 21s who, at any one time, 2 or 3 of them can pop into the team and help out. There you go. Thank you for watching, guys. I've talked for way longer than I planned to there, but I hope you have enjoyed this morning chat on some contracts and even a prospect for the January window as well. A little way off yet, so pinch of salt as always. But I hope you have enjoyed the video, so do drop a like, do subscribe. Thanks for all the kind comments I've had on the last few videos. I was a bit off the boil for the last couple of weeks. International break, life, work, everything else was in the way, but it's nice to be back for a sit down before I start my day. So thank you for watching, guys. Drop a like, as I say, if you're happy to see. Hoping to see Tino and Botman get those new deals. If there's somebody else in the club you think should be getting a new deal at the same time, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.